Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome to Through a Scottish Prism midweek special. And it is special tonight. I've got the great pleasure of interviewing a couple of people who have made a fantastic film. A lot of you already watched, about 2,500 of our followers, but another 55,000, I believe it is, who've watched it from other sources, which is The Adult Human Female. And in this week, when the Scottish Government's about to put through its GRR bill, I think it's appropriate to have this programme and to speak to the filmmakers who recently, as you're probably all aware, were banned from showing their film, a fantastic film, at Edinburgh University. So I'm delighted to welcome Deirdre O'Neill and Michael Wayne. Or is it Mike? Which do you prefer? Is it Mike or Michael? Which is?
Mike.
Mike. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Deirdre. Or Dee. So there, we're off to a start. Thanks very much for joining us. Can I just say before we get started, from a personal point of view, I loved your film. I thought it was wonderfully done. From start to finish, wonderfully produced and so clear, so concise, and just what we need in this debate. But can I start off by asking you, why did you feel the need to make that film in the first place?
Okay, it's been a bit of a process. We've been talking about this on and off for a few years, kind of watching it develop. And we've been kind of quite amazed at how quickly it's developed and how quickly the institutions have been captured. And at first we thought, and as someone said in our film, you know, it's so bonkers that we just didn't think it would ever take hold. We, you know, at some point everyone would go, yeah, that's it. This is really silly. No more. And that isn't what has happened. I mean, it's become more and more embedded into all our institutions. And I think for us, you know, it's a wider issue than just about biological sex, because of course it's about biological sex, but also the way in which it's being imposed on us and the way in which it's gathered traction is through making people frightened to speak out. And that has enormous ramifications for a democratic society. If certain ideologies can be imposed on us, and if certain ideologies can be set up that there is no argument against them, that you are not allowed to critique them, that you are not allowed to engage with them in any way except the positive way, then that has enormous implications for the kind of society that we have. So I think that is why. And also, you know, a friend said to us, why don't you make, you know, we've made other films, and a friend said to us, why don't you make a film about what's going on now? And so that is more or less why we made the film. I think. Yeah.
Mike, were you surprised at some of the pushback that you received when you made this film? I mean, as you say, you've made other documentary films, but never was there ever, I can't think of anything like this where you're only allowed to hear one side of the argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go back to the 60s and 70s where, or I suppose maybe sort of video nasties being banned in the 80s, where films would be, you know, being banned and censored and under various laws. It's incredibly regressive. So yeah, it's an astonishing thing that's happened. The film in two locations now has had screenings prevented, both one in Nottingham and then the other in Edinburgh. So yeah, it has been surprising, but on the other hand, none of our other films that we've made have ever got anywhere near this kind of publicity. So, you know, it's a kind of, you know, it's very counterproductive from the point of view of our opponents. But yeah, don't let
them carry on doing what they're doing. Yeah.
But yeah, from our point of view, it is helping get the message out.
Yeah, I was actually thinking what you're saying about a different. I remember yesterday I wasn't at school, but it was a long while ago. But I remember Lady Chatterley's Lover was getting passed around the play, and then I was watching on Netflix that day and saw the film it's been made into a film. How times change, but this has gone the opposite way. Deirdre, and we've gone back the way, not a bit more enlightenment. So what actually happened at Edinburgh University? Were you invited there in the first place, or did you offer to do it?
We were invited, but obviously we're based in London and we both work full time, so there's no way we could go up midweek to Edinburgh either by train or driving. But we were invited, and the screening was organised by an organisation called Academics for Academic Freedom, and they had been, you know, they were confident that the university would allow it to go ahead. I mean, the university had said, whoever it was that they organised it with, and I don't know those kind of finer details, they had said, yeah, it's fine, you can go ahead. But then what happened was when they arrived, and I think there was about 100 women and some blokes, when they arrived, some students had already got into the theatre, where the lecture theatre where it was going to be screened, and they refused to move. You know, there was, and this is all secondhand, there was, as far as I understand it, there was security there, but the security weren't particularly well prepared. I think they were taken by surprise, and obviously the security can't manhandle students. That wouldn't look great. So they said to the people who'd organised it, go somewhere else. So everyone, they said there's another part of the university where you can show it, and everyone went to go there, but the protesters also went there. So in the end, security said, no, you're not going to be able to show it.
Before that happened, the film had been denounced by both staff and students. The UCU Union and the Staff Pride Network had denounced the film. I don't think anyone had seen it. They denounced it on the basis of content on the website of the film, although they didn't actually say what content was transphobic. They just said it was obvious that it was transphobic, but they couldn't actually cite anything on the website. And so, yeah, I mean, that's quite incredible. That's quite incredible from staff. That's quite an incredible example to set to students. It'd be like expecting them to write an essay on a work of literature without having read the book, primary source. You know, it's incredible that staff are advocating this kind of censorious pride and kind of ignorance and you know, not wanting to engage with the film. So yeah, it says a lot, I think, about the state of academia, in fact.
But it's not just Edinburgh University. This has been happening different. I mean, Kathleen Stock's one. It's been happening all over, as you say, Nottingham. But it goes against the grain, and surely, as you've alluded to, and a couple of your participants did, when we send our kids to university, they're there to broaden their minds, to look at, the job of a university is to look at things from all sides of the argument. I can think the only two things, and they've both been recent, the other one is you daren't be, I'm an old peacenik, you daren't be against this war in Ukraine because you're immediately a pro-Putinist because you say stop the war. Oh, it's bizarre. But this, they're trying to stop all debate. And it's, as I said, this is not the first time. Do you think for a minute, did you look at it and say, let's just check it? Is there anything hateful in here? Is there anything transphobic? Is there anything homophobic? But I didn't see anything. Did you think for a minute you had crossed a line?
No, not at all. We knew exactly the kind of film that we wanted to make, and we wanted to make an evidence-based film that put forward a series of logical arguments, rational arguments that were based in the experiences of the women that spoke on the film and the one man. So it was always situated within their experiences. And like I say, it was rational and logical series of arguments. We wanted to kind of intervene in what's happening and to maybe start a debate. I mean, what's been happening is we are having a debate, but the people that we should be having the debate with aren't really kind of responding in any positive way. No. So, yeah, I mean, there was never any sense that we were going to make accusations against people. The only time in the film where we are more stringent about what's happening, I suppose, is when we talk about the prison And Rebecca, who have been in prison, and talks about allowing men who identify as women into prison, because obviously anyone who's ever worked in a prison or knows anyone that's, we are talking about very, very vulnerable women, women who've often been sexually abused. And the idea that, I think, as Joe Phoenix says in the film, the idea that you would put a man in that situation with those women, it's like words fail you. So we were quite kind of hardcore at that point. But other than that, we weren't. I mean, what we were trying to say is that we need to have this debate because there is a conflict. There is a conflict between women's rights and trans rights. And somehow we have to negotiate our way through that conflict. And that's what we tried to do. But as Mike said, at every point we've been shut down. And not just, the banning at Nottingham and then at Edinburgh University. Eventbrite have taken the tickets down twice. We can't even sell tickets to a screening because Eventbrite, this massive corporation, takes the ticket page down. So there is a sense, our own MP, who we sent a link to the film, and asked if she would watch the film and then discuss the issues it's raised with us. She's refused to see us, to speak to us. So, there is a real sense in which that people don't want to talk about this, because if they talk about it, you might be able to see the weaknesses in the argument and how the argument actually doesn't hold any water once you have this kind of logical, rational, evidence-based argument.
I mean, the nut of the argument, which they want to avoid, is that the reason why they say the film is transphobic, as far as you can tell, it seems to be because the film is questioning some of the rights claims, not all of the rights claims, but some of the rights claims associated with men who identify as women, trans women. And they're conflating contesting those rights claims with saying that these people shouldn't exist. And so every time you want to have a discussion, they're saying you're denying our existence. And of course, that's not the case. No one's denying their existence. No one is denying their right to exist peacefully without discrimination and harassment and all those other things everyone has a right to. No one is denying that. What is being contested is that some of those rights claims need to be scrutinized, and they need to be they do need to be modified, and better balanced against the rights claims of women. And the key modification will be that you cannot accept that trans women are women, full stop, because that, Jane Clare Jones puts it in the documentary, trans women are men who identify as women, and that is a class of things from women who do not identify as women. They just are women.
Yeah, it's absolutely. People have called it controversial, but it's not controversial. I find, they hit the labels. That's the other thing. There's a whole new language has developed around this. That I remember the first time it came out, someone was saying, "Oh, you just support TERFs." I was saying, "What's a TERF?" I had no idea. And they've invented this language and to try and take away from the fact that, as you say, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny in the least. And I think one of your, and it's just saying, well, it's very left wing. No, it's certainly not left wing, is it? I mean, to me, this is right wing. That where you deny someone the right to reply, where you put through a dogma, it's not left wing. That's the right, surely.
I think it's a hybrid thing. The left has had its own history of authoritarianism. The right has had a history of authoritarianism. I don't think any political current has a monopoly on virtue or wisdom or stupidity. So that is why you need critical thinking. Yeah. Because you can't guarantee that you're in the right just because you think you're in a particular political box. You need to better think independently.
I think I've never known another topic that has been so blanked as this. And that's why, would you agree that public screenings are so important, that people can, because the one thing I've found throughout this whole debate, most of the public out there don't actually know what's going on.
Exactly.
So surely public screenings are important.
And I think that's what's come out of particularly the Edinburgh one, that yes, it's important to see the film, but actually what's also important is that people have the right to meet to discuss this. And I think that's what's being shut down. Obviously, that's connected to watching the film, but it seems to be because on Twitter, after the screening was shut down at Edinburgh, there were men going on to Twitter saying, but you can watch it if you want. We're not stopping you watching it. You can watch it at home. There's the link. You can watch it whenever you want. So it seems to be that it wasn't just about stopping us watching the film. It's also about women meeting together to discuss their rights. And that is an incredible thing. I mean, to say, you know, to have men tell you it's okay, you can watch it because I said you can watch it, and you can watch it at home because I said that's where you can watch it. But don't you dare try and go outside and watch it because we'll stop you. I mean,
misogyny and steroids.
But it's misogyny, it's authoritarianism, it's just an incredible. And the problem is, part of the problem is these people are becoming more and more emboldened because there's never any consequences for their actions. As far as I know, Edinburgh University has done nothing about those students who were there. Yeah. And so they've become more emboldened. I mean, if you're ever on Twitter, they send women rape threats, they're violent, they talk about killing TERFs. And there is no, but if a woman says, oh, you're actually a bloke, she can be taken off of Twitter. But you can, you know, you can say to a woman, I'm gonna, I don't know, rape you with, fuck you with my cock, my lady dick, whatever. That's fine. So they've become increasingly emboldened, and that's also incredibly worrying. That because there aren't any consequences, and because of the institutional capture, because the police and the NHS and all these other institutions are captured by this ideology, then there is nowhere to go to complain. You know, like I say, our MP won't speak to us about this issue. So where do you go if you're your representative? I mean, I didn't vote for her, but where do you go? You know, if your representative in Parliament is refusing to speak to you about an issue that you really consider important, and that she might have some influence in, you know, framing the discourse in which it's discussed, but she won't talk to us.
No, it's what I've noticed throughout this whole thing, this whole debate over the last few years, is of all the people who have been questioning, and if I could speak about particularly in Scotland with the self-ID and the hate crime bill, not one person I've spoke to is opposed to someone transitioning, not against it. You know, they're saying fine. And in fact, I found that women are more empathetic than men. What the problem is that they don't want you to have the right to speak, and your film alluded to it, that it seems that most of these people protesting are, and the majority are men, not women, or not even trans women. There's not you haven't seen trans women or trans men appearing to demonstrate against it. It is invariably younger men. That is also worrying.
The trans rights activists, very often they're not trans people. They may be, the majority seem to be not trans people. They seem to be men
who don't like women, who, and then, you know, and I think, you know, you talked about our film being labeled as controversial. I don't think our film is controversial. I think the idea that you can change your biological sex is controversial, but I also think there is something to be said about the amount of men who obviously have a real problem with women. You know, and there are every week there are approximately 3 women killed in this. That's controversial, but we're not addressing those. And it seems to me that there's a lot of energy going into kind of hating women for having opinions, while these other controversial things are just carrying on as normal. So, you know, again, it's that kind of misuse of language. So a film that talks about the rights of women, biological women, something that all women have in common, that is deemed controversial. But the fact that, 3 women a week are being killed by partners or ex-partners, and that women are being prevented from talking about these issues because they're all linked, and that there is obviously a deep rooted strand of misogyny in our society, those things aren't being discussed.
And on the left, unfortunately, this was something that I don't think we appreciated, either of us really appreciate, until this movement started happening, just how much misogyny there is on the left from left-wing men. You can see a lot of it on social media. That's the easiest place you can see it.
Yeah. And what is also interesting is how many left-wing men call themselves revolutionaries and Marxists in their bios, but look the other way, don't say a word when this is happening. We get very little support from people men who call themselves Marxists and revolutionaries. So one of the interesting things has been kind of seeing that a lot of left-wing men who consider themselves to be radical, just haven't come up and helped. We kind of have found out who's going to be on the on the back.
Again, harping back to Scotland, where we have a First Minister who says she's a feminist to her fingertips, but she did say that women's concerns were not valid. Now, square that circle for me. How can you be a feminist and then say women's concerns are not valid?
Yeah.
They're not, are they? They're not.
The thing is it's a real institutional deafness, isn't it? From the political elites, and it doesn't matter if they're at that level. You can be a man or a woman. There's just an institutionalized failure to listen, and it is incredible because they're just not listening. They're just not hearing what people are saying. And it's quite staggering.
You're filming the bit where Keir Starmer is asked, "Can a woman have a penis?"
Yeah.
And he absolutely get it's incredible.
Yeah, it makes you want to cringe. Yeah,
it does. But as you said, we touched on it earlier. But academia have strayed from their normal practices. And it's people in the academia. Are the middle class lefties trying to be trendy? Is that what this is about? Is this a fad?
Academia is very fashion led. It is. People jump on fashions. They think that's where careers are made. That's where funding can be tapped. If something's very hot and fashionable, you jump on it, and you can get funding from various bodies. So it is disappointing, I think, that academia isn't really doing its job, which is, again, as Jane Clare Jones says in the film, it is to hold public discourse to account, to scrutinize it. And if you're not doing that, what is the purpose of these institutions?
But I think there's a couple of, I think, in my experience, I've spoken to academics who absolutely know that this is rubbish and it's dangerous and it's sinister, but they are too scared now to speak out because it has such a hold that actually to speak out puts you in danger, particularly as a lot of academics are on hourly paid contracts or short-term contracts. So again, as we said right at the beginning, this imposition of this ideology, and one of the ways that it's kept afloat is by people fearing what will happen if they speak up.
Yeah. Just what happened to Kathleen Stock. Yeah. That is astonishing.
And Joe Phoenix.
Yeah. But actually masked students on campus, and putting posters up and calling for her to be sacked. She's a feminist, not a fascist, or she's a philosopher, not a fascist. That's an astonishing failure on the part of the institutions to protect the staff and protect the principle of academic freedom.
But they keep saying, the trans community are the most marginalised in the world. You say, well, what rights is it you don't have at present that you're looking for? And could you give me some examples of where you've been marginalised? You're a transphobe, pardon? That's how quick they come out. You're a homophobe, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi for asking that question. It is a lot of hyperbole, but there is actually no fact or behind what they've got It doesn't add up.
And I think that's why they don't like our film, because it is based in fact evidence, and so that is why they're desperate to shut it down. And I think, this idea that they're a marginalized group of people, and that the power dynamic is with other groups. I mean, again, like you say, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny because they've infiltrated every institution, and it isn't. I can't imagine that women would have the power to shut down a film screening, as happened in Edinburgh the other night. So I would say the power dynamic rests firmly with them. They have the institutions, they have the media, they have MPs, they have the National Health Service. All of these institutions are behind and are supporting them. So again, it's this kind of misinformation and this distortion of the facts to say that they're a marginalized group, when obviously they're not. They're a very powerful group. And that's another thing that we need to be looking at and investigate. Why are they so powerful? How are they so powerful? Who's supporting them? In America, for instance, the pharmaceutical companies are making a fortune because and you talked a little while ago about kind of women being accepting of people transitioning, but I think we need to be very careful when we talk about transitioning. If you're socially transitioning and you want someone to call you by another name, then maybe some people find that acceptable. That's fine. But also what we're talking about, particularly with younger people, is a medical transition, which means that they are having irreversible medical interventions that will affect them for the rest of their lives. So for the pharmaceutical companies and the private health companies, that's fantastic, because that's a lifelong kind of profit machine. But for these kids, and Simon talks about it in our films, for these kids, that's like horrible. Osteoporosis, sterility, constant pain. And that's something else that doesn't get talked about, is the detransitioners, the people that do it when they're young and then actually change their minds. And that's and that's why I think we have to be ever so careful about this whole idea of transitioning, and be open about actually what that means, and inform. And also, kids shouldn't be allowed to. I mean, you just shouldn't allow kids to transition. There should be an age.
You don't let them vote. They can't go to the army. They can't get married, but they can change their sex, age 6 or 8. I mean, please, come on. But it's not that long ago, Mike, that the same people now who are talking about, are backing this, were complaining bitterly about genital mutilation in Africa and places like that. They're saying how terrible it was. And now they're encouraging people to go to places like Tavistock to get genitalia.
It's another circle or square that you have to.
It's a contradiction. On one hand, they're sort of arguing that they want changes in the Gender Recognition Act, so to move away from medicalization. That's one of the arguments for self-ID. But on the other hand, you've got this pathway opening up for medicalization, when maybe this kind of medicalization that is irreversible and structural to your body, where maybe there are other kinds of less invasive kinds of medicalization that might help you through a period of difficulty that you're having.
Yes, I mean, of course, if someone's feeling, it must be really horrible to feel like you've been born in the wrong body, and body dysmorphia is a real thing. But people need help and support and therapy, not encouraged to believe that their body dysmorphia actually means that they were born in the wrong body, that, they can change their sex.
Yeah, but there's some boys are more effeminate. Some girls are tomboys. I mean, I remember when I was young, there was a girl who used to play football. My God, she had a great left hook as well. I met her many years later, and it's a beautiful woman, 3 kids, 2 grandkids. But nowadays they would have her wheeled away, have her breasts removed, and do God knows what to her. That's a ridiculous thing about this.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? Rather than break down gender stereotypes, this whole movement reinforces the very stereotypes that we should be moving away from, so that people don't have to conform to some socially constructed idea of what a woman is or what a man is. Yeah. So we can just have our personalities and be who we are. But no, like you say now, you know, if little boys want to play with dolls, then they can't be boys, they must be girls. If little girls want to cut their hair short, you know, Lucy talks about it in our film, you know, and they want to play football, then they must be a boy. I mean, it is so regressive.
It's another example, but on the surface, it appears to be progressive and it claims that it's challenging, you know, stereotypes, but actually you scratch beneath the surface and it doesn't take a lot of scratching on that one, and it's, you know, very regressive content is revealed.
Yeah, there was one of your I think gave me a bit of hope that hopefully this will pass. It was your one of your contributors who said that they used to think that lobotomies and thalidomide were, you know, the key to things. And, you know, history has taught us how bad they were and we pulled away from it. But what worries me is that a lot of young people, and as you've alluded to, you know, I've read some horror stories of people detransitioning or trying to detransition. And this is going to be as bad as thalidomide, dare I say, because there will be people who cannot go back and who will have matured. And we all know, I mean, if we can remember that far back, it is difficult, puberty and things like that, and confusion for people. And then you're coming through it. But they're not getting allowed to do that. They seem to be grabbing them and got you and move you on. And that's dangerous and it's wrong.
The collateral damage is immense. But people, you know, the people who are really invested in this just don't seem to want to think about that. They want to sacrifice everything on the altar of what to us seems like an ideology. We'd love to have a debate with them to see if they can convince us otherwise. But yeah, it's difficult to get them in the room. Well, that's their slogan, isn't it? There is no debate. And again, that comes back to the idea, because they say you're debating their existence, but we're not. We're debating some of the rights claims and some of the implications that are tied up with your rights claims.
And also, both times that the film has been kind of shut down, both in Nottingham and in Edinburgh, someone invited the protesters in to watch the film and have the debate. Both times they've been invited. And they just won't. They won't. No,
but for about 18 months now, I've had an open invite to someone to come along and explain. And I'm not there to trip them up. I want to hear it. I would love to be convinced that it's safe and that women won't suffer. I've got 3 beautiful granddaughters, and that's my concern. I worry about their safety. So come and talk. No, you're just a transphobe. We wouldn't talk to you. You're a Nazi. You know, it could be worse. They could call me a Tory. Then I would be really upset. There's no bigger insult. But where does it end, Mike? How do we end this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ends when some of the institutions are forced to listen to people, listen to women in particular, because they're on the front line on this. But as Dee said, it does raise more general issues, children as well, but also, you know, the sort of broader issues of democracy and science and reason. But yeah, we have to force them to listen, because that's what they're not doing, and there has to be a reset on this and start the conversation again. Well, the conversation never really happened, but start having a proper conversation this time, so that because, you know, there are solutions. It is, you know, conflicting rights claims is something that happens all the time, and we have usually institutions don't have a massive problem in kind of, you know, sort of working out solutions to this, but you have to sort of acknowledge that there are conflicting rights claims, and at the moment that's not happening. They're just refusing flat out that there is a conflict here, and yet women are saying yes, there is. And so we have to break through that barrier that Nicola Sturgeon, symbolizes so well, and force them to listen.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things to see is once you've broken through that barrier, and once you kind of start to set out or reinforce some safeguarding around women and girls, just how many men will want to transition, how many men will want to call themselves women, because it seems to me that at the moment what we're encouraging is, the trans umbrella has broadened so much that we're kind of encouraging fetishists and all kinds of different people, so that the trans people have got lost in lots of other that aren't necessarily safe. And that's the problem. How with like allowing men into women's spaces, it's not obviously it's not that all men are a danger, but how do you know which ones are and which one? That's why those safeguards are there in the first place, because it's difficult to know. And I just wonder, once this kind of space where they've been allowed to just kind of run riot, to make so many outlandish and outrageous demands, once that's shut down, I just wonder if things would settle down a bit more, and people who just want to live their lives will be just left to live their lives, because I think that part of what we've seen, and then we've just talked about this, but what we've seen is a kind of emboldening and a legitimization of things that should never have been emboldened or legitimized.
No, agreed. Yeah. It should have sent a message to the politicians like Nicola Sturgeon, Keir Starmer, etc., that it's the lesbians who are getting the biggest attack by these people, Mike. And surely that should send an alarm bell ringing.
There's so many alarm bells in the film, but that alarm bell is in the film where Lucy Masood talks about the fact that she gets thrown off a lesbian dating site because she specifies that she only wants to date women, biological women. I mean, you couldn't make this up. It's crazy.
No.
But yeah, I mean, some very strange things start to happen with our understanding of sexuality if sex-based preferences are no longer something that you can take into account. Some really weird things happen, and one of the weird things that is happening is that for lesbians in particular, their sexual preferences are being denied,
and and lesbians are having to meet in secret again. I mean, it's like Victorian England, or something. I mean, it's just incredible.
I mean, it's like having a Rangers fanzine that only allows Celtic supporters to try. I mean, it's that stupid. It really is. And it goes on. But the other one was one of the debates that come up. Someone said to the Shauna Robinson, who's steering this through Holyrood, that predators. That was the biggest concern for everyone, was that predators. Oh, and she said, men won't do that. I mean, that was, they don't do that sort of thing. And you say, do you remember Jimmy Savile, Shona? Yeah, I mean, you do remember Mr. Glitter.
Yeah.
But they're in absolute denial that there's any danger, and that is, to me, the danger.
Do you remember that? I don't know if it's still a thing, but a couple of years ago there was this sort of upskirting thing where men were using. This was men doing that. Women weren't doing that. So it is. They're living in denial. This all flows from the basic idea that you can change your sex and that gender identity is more important than other objective material factors like biology and like socialization. You don't just drop your socialization at the drop of a hat. That's something that's really, really deeply ingrained.
Yeah, but it's true. As someone said, I saw something online that if 100 years from now an archaeologist digs up your body, he'll know if you're male or female. He won't know if you were a trans woman or a trans man.
Absolutely.
That is what it's all about. Mike D, I can't thank you enough. Our time is running out rapidly. I thank you again for making this wonderful film, and I hope more and more people will watch it. And if you're watching this and you haven't already seen the film Adult Human Female, you can get it on YouTube, you can get it on my website, you can get it on Twitter, Spotify, you can get it on all over the place. Get it, look at it, share it. Tomorrow's a big day for us in Scotland because, as you know, this bill, and it's likely going to pass. The terrible thing that I'm thinking for me, I've got a terrible conflict, because the likelihood is Suella Braverman has said she's going to strike it down. Now, from my point of view as a person who believes in Scottish independence, I find it very difficult that the English Home Secretary could actually save, but
I'm sorry.
Needs
must. I think these conflicts are real, Roddy. I mean, after Edinburgh, we've been kind of contacted by the Telegraph, the Times, the Mail, all newspapers that we don't necessarily engage with or read. But, the right are owning this because the left have just completely abandoned us. So we have no choice at the moment. I mean, I'm not talking about the extreme right here, but I mean, like the conservative, and they're enjoying this. They're enjoying.
Of course they are.
Stop it. They could stop it like that, but they're sitting there watching the left tear themselves apart.
As is our way.
Yeah, and I will say that I think, I know if we're running out of time, but I do think this is a very, very middle class movement.
Yes.
I think, there was a kind of vacuum in politics that had been filled by a lot of middle class people. And if you look at kind of the makeup of the Labour Party, the left wing media, we are talking about, a lot of privately educated Oxbridge graduates who do not have any anchor in the working class, and their concerns are not the concerns of the working class. Their views are not the views of the working class. And so their kind of worries and concerns, which often, like you say, is about being seen as trendy or edgy or whatever. And what they call a progressive movement, what it does is it gives them an opportunity to look progressive and radical and not talk about class. And I think one of the biggest things that this is really responsible for and has been strategized for is to deflect away from questions of class at a moment when we need to bring it much, much more to the fore than we have done for a long time.
And it's noticeable that Keir Starmer, the only policy that he's carried on from Corbyn era is precisely this policy.
Okay.
He's dropped everything else, but not this one.
Yeah, it's I've said it should tell you something when a knight of the realm is leading the Labour Party and suggesting that the military should break strikes. The world's going to hell in a handcart. It's all over. Dee, Mike, thanks a million times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wish you success, and do keep in touch, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
To you watching, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed speaking to Mike and Dee. And until I see you all again, have a great Christmas and New Year. Take care now.
Bye.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.